it here too. Well, thanks everybody for coming on back. And wow, what a fantastic list. Just, I mean, again, just folks who are already involved in places, interested in places, have, you know, it just really, I love the variety, actually. I think it's fantastic. So our next speaker, who's going to be focusing on fundraising, David Thomason, Vice President of Advancement for Special Olympics Virginia, also a dear friend, and just really, again, all of these speakers today, I just really want to thank them for their time. But yeah, so we'll kick it off to David, again, with questions. Feel free to put in the chat. I've got a couple kind of keyed up already, but also, you know, if you'd like to hold them until chat, and you can ask them personally as well. But without further ado, David, take us away.
Great, thank you, Dean, and thank you, everyone. I echo the thanks that's already been given for you to give up 3 hours or 2 hours or any time on a Saturday, particularly, is admirable, and we appreciate it. Especially someone like me who's been in the nonprofit world for my entire career. We understand the importance of your involvement and your engagement and your contributions and your passion for our mission. So thank you. Everyone's schedule is extremely busy, and we appreciate you being here. As Dean said, and as the title says, we're just going to take a high-level look at fundraising. You know, there are lots and lots and lots of components to it. We're going to touch on some, certainly not all, but just to give sort of a high-level view of some of the things that are involved with fundraising and how it impacts organizations with which you already work, how it can impact organizations with which you already work or that you plan to work with, and how you can be part of that, how you can offer your leadership in those organizations to either create some new fundraising opportunities or to enhance the ones that are there. So with that, there we go. I like this image for a number of reasons, and really, all organizations need to be able to fund their program. They need to be able to accomplish their mission, and it takes funds to do that. You know, we all know that. And in this context, you know, the conversation that Deanna just had and the one that you're going to hear from Dontrice, this fundraising is sort of a connector of that mission that Deanna spoke about and doing great things that Dontrice is going to talk about. It's an essential ingredient, and it's something that we all in the nonprofit world have learned as a critical tool to use. It empowers. It's sort of the machine that empowers all that we do. And your involvement, you know, some people, one of the things I want to make sure we convey today, some people think that fundraising is a dirty word. It really is not. It's something that can be a lot of fun, can really harness some of the leadership skills that you have and can help you develop others. And certainly for organizations that for which you have passion, it's a wonderful way for you to contribute to growing its footprint and growing its impact. I did want to talk, you know, it's often when we talk about fundraising, there's several terms that float around out there. You know, there's lots of jargon in our world, of course. Just to kind of touch on these, you know, fundraising literally is just generating income, you know. And in and of itself, you know, it's not as effective as when we incorporate these other elements of what, you know, sometimes things are called fundraising when they're not, sometimes they're called development when they're other things. But development is really about the relationship, you know, and some people think that, you know, it's all about the relationship, it's cliche, but it is so critical, particularly in the world of fundraising. It's about helping people understand how they can be connected to your cause, how they can be connected to your mission, and how they can invest in it. Rarely in my world, and just a little background, I work for Special Olympics Virginia, and as Vice President of Advancement, I work one-on-one with high net worth individuals, about 100 of them across the state. And I love that, you know, mine is a very one-on-one, very personal touch kind of work for the organization. And when I say I, that means me and our board and our staff and our volunteers. We involve a big team in doing that. And we're very fortunate with the team that we have. So really the development is just that, developing that understanding, developing those relationships and helping people understand why it's so important for them to be part of what we do. And philanthropy is really, you know, actively promoting others' welfare, just generically speaking, but a good a good organization incorporates all of these things. Many times people shy away from fundraising because they don't want to make an ask. This shows you that, really the ask in fundraising is about 5 to 10% of the entire job. There's so much more that goes into it. And today we're going to talk about some of the ways that you can be part of that. Certainly you can ask if it's appropriate for you to do that and comfortable for you to do that. But there's so many other things you can do in the world of fundraising and development. As a reflection that things are changing and how we talk about development and fundraising and philanthropy, I know that SOAR 365 somewhat recently changed their development department to the community engagement department. And exactly, that's what it's about. Get that community engaged in many ways, volunteering, giving their time, giving their talent, giving their treasure, their wealth as well. And at Special Olympics, the committee that I work with is called Connecting Fans and Funds. I mean, it's exactly what we do. Deanna was talking about, you might be a fan of animal care, taking care of animals or children or art. We have fans of Special Olympics, and we just want to connect that passion that they've created for our organization with other ways that they can contribute, including financially. I would encourage you, as you look at organizations, either those you are already involved with or that you want to, there's something called a culture of philanthropy. And in an organization that embraces a culture of philanthropy, everybody is involved in what we've just talked about, that development and that philanthropy in some way, in how you volunteer, what your organization represents. And I think those that are run well have a very healthy culture of philanthropy. So I'd encourage you just to, as was mentioned earlier, dig a little deeper and see what the organization's approach to philanthropy and development is, and see how you might best fit into that. I like this quote, fundraising is a general art of teaching the joy of giving. There really is a joy in giving. We all know that. You're here because you're giving your time right now, and hopefully you're getting, with your involvement with organizations, you're getting some joy. But we, in this business, we get the opportunity to share our joy of giving and encourage others to create that as well. Passion creates support. It leads to support in so many ways. It leads to support, whether it's in the time that you give in volunteering, the talent you're offering, the leadership you're giving, the financial contribution that you choose to give. And part of what we do, as I said earlier, is help people identify their passion and how their passions connect with our missions. And so as you are seeking new opportunities, I encourage you to do some, as was mentioned earlier, find what that passion is and find how you best connect with an organization. And certainly we've had a couple of recent examples that illustrate this point, that passion creates support. Just within 1 month period in the realm of racial justice and equity, within a 1 month period, $3.67 billion was raised to support the work surrounding racial justice and equity. Certainly an issue that had urgency to it, but people's passions created this tremendous donation to try to create some change in this area that was many people feel passionate about. And this money, was given to large and small organizations. One message I want to make sure we convey with fundraising is all gifts are important. Some people are able to give large amounts of money, others are not, but all gifts are important, especially in the context of how the relationship and their investment, their overall investment in you and your organization is what's most important. So all gifts are so important. In a similar way with the COVID-19 work, a little bit of a longer period, over 5 months, you can see that $4.2 billion was raised, and you can kind of see where these funds came from. Bottom line, clearly people give to causes and to organizations about which they're passionate. And we're a generous nation. This is a 2019 Giving USA study, which shows that almost $450 billion was given. And of that, about $900 million came from the Richmond area. I realize we have people on the call who aren't in the Richmond area, but I thought it was impressive that Richmond is, among the top 50 cities when it comes to philanthropy and giving. And $900 million of that amount came from the Richmond area. And I always, particularly because I work with individual giving, I always want to point this statistic out. you'll see that if with the 69% of individuals and the bequests, which are also individual giving, just giving that someone has put into their estate planning, and then about half of the foundation. So about almost 90% of all giving is from individuals versus corporations or other means. So certainly in my world, it's important to consider where that comes from. Oops, I think I went the wrong way there. Sorry about that. Here we go. Oh, nope, here we go. Apologies. Some people have been concerned about how COVID-19 might impact giving. Certainly in our world, we're looking at how we're having to change events to virtual events, and how people may be concerned about giving in their finances, and understandably so. I think this is encouraging in that, if you combine this 54% who plan to maintain their giving and the 25%, you're almost at 80%, 79% who are either going to give the same or more. Again, I think this goes back to the fact that many of these organizations have people who love their missions, who love their organization, and understand that now, maybe even more so than other, is an important time for them to continue giving. So I find that interesting that passion continues even in times of a pandemic that we're dealing with. So here's a sort of overwhelming slide of 15 ways, some ways. This is certainly not a totally comprehensive list. There are other ways to give, but just to give a little snapshot of some of the ways that organizations that you're dealing with may be striving to fund their mission. Finding ways to make it easy for people to give, make it easy for, or reasonable at least, for staff and volunteers to conduct whatever the campaign or the event is, while making it meaningful for those who are donating. Almost all organizations have to diversify their giving channels, their revenue sources, and we have to be very strategic about it. Not all of these, or some of these, will not work for any organizations, and certainly not all of these work for all organizations. We've got to be extremely strategic about how we approach that, and which sources we do use, and which ones, very importantly, which ones we don't. Because some of these processes, some of these approaches really have a low return on investment, and if the ROI is not there, it just is not productive for the organization. So keep in mind, as you're talking to people, particularly if you're connecting with their development or outreach or fundraising department, that they are trying to balance all of these things in a way to reach the goals that they've set for themselves. We're not going to touch on each of these, but we are going to talk about a few, and just a few of the, again, high-level points about each of them that we discuss here. Annual giving, many are familiar with this. It's a recurring request for gifts. Sometimes it's done through snail mail. Sometimes it's done in other ways. Typically, these are smaller to mid-sized gifts, and that definition of small to mid-sized to major is all relative to the organization. Everybody has their definition of that. And often these funds are used for operating budget. It's a repeating program. One of the big expenses with this sort of gift is called acquisition, where we're requiring those new donors, and that takes a lot of time and energy, and therefore costs. So ideally, annual giving is something that we can go back to the same people who have supported us, thank them for their giving throughout the year, and then they will continue to renew their gifts. Ideally, increasing their commitment to us. Foundations and grants. There are many organizations. I think I saw somebody in the Q&A ask about grants earlier. This is a really wonderful source of funding. There's an application process with it that does require a good amount of work. In fact, many organizations have one person who's committed to grant writing. Often it's a part-time job, depending on the size of the organization, but it can take a great deal of time. Each organization who's granting the funds might ask for different things. So while you can have sort of a template for writing these, you have to certainly customize it to each organization. And usually it's to a specific initiative or program. We want XYZ Foundation to fund our summer games, or this year's educational materials or whatever it is. And often, it also requires a good amount of follow-up because organizations want to know how their investment impacted, how their grant impacted your work. So that can take some time. Civic and service organizations are wonderful in many ways. So we have, I know Special Olympics Virginia, and I know SOAR 365 has a wonderful relationship with a couple of them. In fact, I know that some members from Knights of Columbus are on this call, and that's one of the organizations that certainly supports our two organizations. And often with these groups, other examples like Kiwanis and Rotary Club and other service groups, they come with tremendous volunteer support too. They want to give they raise funds. It's in their, because it's in their charter to help other organizations. So it's organization helping organization. It's a really wonderful connection and service that they provide for us. Along with that, it's an opportunity for their members to get to know us better by volunteering, and certainly that helps us. At Special Olympics, we typically conduct lots of events which require lots of volunteers. And so we rely heavily on that kind of thing. And it's a really wonderful way to continue to, once again, build those relationships. Corporate, giving, lots of people know about this. Many people ask me, well, does all your money come from corporate giving? And some does. But that chart we looked at earlier from Giving USA represented that really about 5% of total giving comes from corporations. So while it's very important, it's not quite as significant a percentage as many people might think. There are most organizations, are happy to have their brand aligned with yours. They want to. It's a really wonderful mutual relationship. We have, it's wonderful to show that we have the support from these corporations, and it's a fantastic opportunity for them to also show that they are part of what you're doing. Sometimes, typically corporate giving, sometimes it comes from the profits of the corporation. Sometimes they have a separate foundation through which they grant these. So corporate giving is just different. And again, the staff member at the organization where you're volunteering can help you understand that more deeply. And again, often when a corporation gives a gift to our organization, they're looking for opportunities to volunteer, and we welcome that. It's a wonderful way for us to get to know each other in that process. Text to give. We were talking about this. Some of you may have already been on, but it was pre-call. This is something that has some great advantages. It also has a few challenges once in a while. It depends on. This is one of those that I believe is very specific to what you're doing. It can be very turnkey. Pick up your phone, punch this text into this number. Sometimes it takes you to a website to which you have to input other information, but it is very easy. It's an easy way for you to mark it. You can put, text. You can text Leadership Basic to 76278. You can put that in your signatures, your email signature. So it's on your website. It's an easy way to get the word out. Often it's campaign related. Often I've seen these like the Red Cross for recovery from storms or some political campaigns. Or in this case, Susan, I just found this out. I literally just put this onto the slide a few minutes ago. It's an opportunity for anyone on the call to try this out and see how it works by texting Leadership Basic to 76278 to help the efforts of SOAR 365. So I thought that was very interesting to hear. Don't be shy. Feel free to do that. Planned giving is sometimes a difficult thing for us to discuss, but it's an important thing for us to discuss. Planned giving is when someone has put into their estate, into their will, that upon their death, they would like to support the organization that was so important to them during their lifetime. It's a wonderful way for people to leave a legacy for the work that they already did when they were here with us. And often, the work we do for planned giving is I roll it into my conversations with my donors. I'm just like, because people are sometimes updating their will. I literally just updated my will, and I included Special Olympics in my planned giving. So it's an important thing for us to have top of mind and talk about with people who might be in that process. And though we might do the work now, these gifts may not come in for decades. We've been wonderfully surprised by some bequests that have come in that we obviously you don't know when that will happen, but it's such a wonderful way for someone to leave a legacy. So I included in this list because it is important, but it might not be one that everyone is familiar with or has heard much about. This is something that, depending on your employer, it's a wonderful way for you to supercharge your gift. You make a gift of $50, they match it for 50, so your total gift is 100, or do the math there. I've seen as much as a 3-to-1 match, which is amazing. But not all organizations do any matching gifts at all. And certainly if they do, it's not always 3-to-1. I would encourage you, here's an easy way for you just to check it with your employer. Does your company offer matching gifts? So when you do make a financial contribution to any organization, it'll go much farther. And your company has that program because they want to also support organizations that matter to you, to their employees. Another way you can check on how you can give a very easy way is through workplace campaigns, things like United Way, of course, CDC, Commonwealth of Virginia, federal employees. And sometimes your company may have its own workplace campaigns, a way that you can contribute through your paycheck. So it makes it very easy and turnkey. You just tell them what you would like to have come from your paycheck and how and to whom you'd like it to go. And I mentioned major gifts earlier. Most of our major gifts work in the world of nonprofit is with high net worth individuals. Again, major is defined by the organization. I've heard organizations who, a $50 gift is a major gift. And I've heard other organizations that the bottom limit for major gift is $1 million. So, it's what's significant to the organization and what that organization defines as major gifts. But it's a gift that will is meaningful to the donor and is certainly meaningful to the organization. Again, every gift matters of any size. We know that, and we want to garner them, which is part of the diversification of development and philanthropy and fundraising. We want to make sure that we reach people at a level that is best for them and best for the organization. And sometimes there's a little bit of science to that, a little bit of finesse, but that's an important part of this work that we create. Many people have heard of the events part of what we do. In events, whether it's the Ice Bucket Challenge or whether it's diving into a cold ocean in the middle of winter. This is Special Olympics Virginia. We have 3,500 people help us raise $1.2 million by let them jump into the ocean, by getting, paying us to let them jump into the ocean. It can be wacky. They can be, here's another one. This is a lot of fun. This is a Source 365's wine tasting event. You come and drink some wine, have some wonderful food, hear about the programming, help support the programming. There's a silent auction that goes along with it. I've been involved with this event as a volunteer for a number of years now. I enjoy it tremendously, and we can do it. So special events can be, all of those things, wonderful, wacky. They can take a lot of time. This is strategy as well. Sometimes while they are all those things that we mentioned, they can just create enough work and enough resources that the ROI has to be looked at really carefully. But when done well, they can raise tremendous funds, but also a tremendous way to raise awareness, which is not to be undervalued. So I think it's interesting. And this morning when I woke up, I turned on my social feed, and the first thing that popped up was a picture I had taken when Park 365 opened 5 years ago. And I just thought, whoa, get out of my head. How did you know that? It's crazy. But I do know that Soar 365 on September 17th is sponsoring something called Honk and Cheer, talk about pivoting an event to something that is virtual. I'm sure there's lots more information available, but Honk and Cheer, come by the park. It's been a tremendous success through the 5 years that it's been there, and I'm sure it will be there for many, many more years. While we're on events, one of the sources that I mentioned in that 15 sources slide was peer-to-peer, or many people just call it P2P. Events are a wonderful way to create traffic within your network, right? So I'm going to go, I'll give you an example. The Special Olympics just did. A Special Olympics at our summer games in June typically has the support of law enforcement community across the state. And they physically carry torches from all points of the state to our summer games in Richmond, running about 1,900 miles all told. Clearly, we couldn't do that. We couldn't do our event, but we did turn it into a fundraising, a virtual torch run event. And I participated, as did many people. We had hoped that we'd get enough people to cover the 1,900 miles, and we'd hoped that we'd get enough people to raise $25,000. As it turned out, people reached out to people and networks reached out to networks. And this is such an critical part of all fundraising, but particularly with this sort of peer-to-peer event fundraising. And as it turned out, we didn't cover 1,900 miles, but we covered 6,200, and we didn't raise 25,000, but we raised 100,000. So it really was a wonderful success for us. Again, while continuing to expand our network and continuing to expand our exposure and our awareness of what we were doing and how we were doing it, and letting people be part of that. So it's a wonderful way in reference, excuse me. Okay, great. In reference to events, how peer-to-peer will factor into that. So quick overview of many things I know, and so where you can help. And this is just, again, certainly not a comprehensive list, but it is a list of some things you can do today. And as you decide how you want to offer your leadership, and as you decide how you want to impact organizations in the realm of fundraising, these are some things you can do. Connect, connect, connect. Let people in the organization you care about know about, people in your network that you want to invite to events. You want to, that maybe might be able to volunteer with you, that might be a candidate for a major gift. It could be lots of things, but your networks and one of the biggest gifts you can give organizations is opening up your network to us. And, if a mission matters to you, and if you matter to your friends, often that mission will matter to your friends, right? So it's a wonderful way to connect your passions and share your passion with your network and help the organization. Be an ambassador and advocate for us. One of the things we talked about earlier with our Young Professionals Board at Special Olympics Virginia, I reached out to a few people, and they said, often, like in the corporate world, for example, having that person on the inside advocating for our organization makes a world of difference. So any setting you're in, corporate is one place, but it can be your workplace, it can be your community, it can be your church, it can be wherever you are. Be advocates and ambassadors for our organizations. And then make a personal stretch gift. That's always a sign that you are committed and you're showing it with a financial way. Again, that's a very personal choice. By stretch, I mean something that's significant for you and that is often we'll say one of the top 3 gifts that you give to nonprofit organizations is sort of what a stretch gift is, and by some definitions. And then again, check on matching gifts and workplace campaigns. Are there already existing ways that you can easily help with fundraising for organizations that matter to you? And then because of the examples I'd cited with events, I said, dive in, dive into helping with an event, dive in, help ask the staff if there are ways you can help. Most of us are ready and willing to engage you in ways that maybe we haven't thought about, maybe you haven't thought about, but that conversation is an important one to have. So, just dive in and I would encourage you when you're talking about ambassadorship and advocacy, much of development and fundraising, particularly the development aspect of what we're doing, is about storytelling. So start creating your own stories. You get out there, experience the mission, be part of the mission. And understand, exactly the depth of passion that you do have this organization, and then start telling that story. So start creating your own stories and start sharing them. And in that vein, there's so much that we can give, and when done right, you get at least as much as you give. I promise you that. In fact, I have when I was very early in this role of development, I've been with Special Olympics 33 years. But the first 20 was program. And when I switched over to development 13 years ago, we were talking to a major philanthropist in town. Most people in Richmond would know who this person is. And, he gave us a very generous gift. I believe it was $25,000 or $30,000. And he said, I'm so happy to give this to you, but I'm getting so much more in return. It was almost like an aha moment. He's like, I didn't really think about it until I came and I saw your summer games. But those sorts of illustrations of how, in giving, we absolutely receive, have encouraged me to stay in this career. It's been my career from college. I went to the Peace Corps, and then I worked for the American Heart Association, and now I've been at Special Olympics for this amount of time. So it's been important to me to do this, and I hope it will be for you as well. And then finally, a quote that I saw that was part of John Lewis's piece that was written and posted soon after his death. I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. Why is this in a fundraising presentation? Because I think that in pursuing, again, what your heart feels and what is passionate for you, you are able to best lead. When you lead from that place, you are able to offer, bring your A game and help certainly the organizations for whom you're volunteering and that you're leading, but also for yourself. I think that can apply in many, many situations. So with that, I thank you for your time. And I know we covered many, many areas, but thank you so much. And I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Wow, thank you so much, David. And I should point out to everybody, on September 22nd, David's going to be honored by VAFRI as well. And so we are extra lucky to be able to get his time today too. So, all right, I've got a couple of things that are already kind of brewing that are both from comments that have been said to me privately, as well as a couple of the public ones. So let me kind of bridge off of that. You did mention grant writing, and you talked a little bit about, and there was a great grant station being mentioned as a way to find grants. One of the things I was going to point out about grant writing too is there's some great resources in the area, and I say in the area meaning Richmond, but they're also going to be virtual much of this year. So if you're not in the Richmond area, you can take advantage of them through University of Richmond's Institute on Philanthropy. Does some amazing grant writing courses that David's also involved in, and I am on the communications courses side, that I think are some great resources there. But the people ask about finding out about grants and finding out about grant writing. I think those are two good resources. David, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I honestly work very little with grants, but I do that. That's a wonderful resource. But IOP, Institute on Philanthropy, has a tremendous session on that. I don't teach that session. I teach in board engagement and leadership volunteer engagement. But that sounds like a good resource.
Yeah. So also one thing I wanted to point out, I had a conversation earlier actually during Deanna's with Spencer, and I think you had a great slide with just the sheer volume of different sources of communications and sort of touch points. And one of the things that we were talking about a little bit was, especially for younger professionals, it shocked, if you really look at that particular slide, how many of those were electronic versus paper, or I think is notable. And one of those things, especially, it's not just younger generations, but the perception of waste at times that if I'm getting something in the mail, this is something that could have been sent to me electronically. That's something else I think perception-wise to keep in mind. All right, so now a couple of actual questions.
Can I make a quick comment about that?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
In my world, especially with major gifts with individuals, it's so much a donor-centric approach. Does that person prefer a handwritten note? Do they prefer an email? Do they prefer nothing? And so that's part of the time that, again, knowing the relationship, knowing the donor. So yes, there's some overarching ways that will help us save time, save money. But again, to me, it needs to be custom made to the specific way of fundraising and the people with whom you're working.
So I think, that's a great segue actually into Dontrice's question, really about cultivating relationships, because part of that relationship is how would that person like to be communicated with, how, just all those kind of touch points. Can you touch a little bit about on that cultivating relationship aspect of fundraising? Because I feel like sometimes that gets very tied up into the people that might be at an org and they're sort of they're going to handle a relationship I'm new to
Right.
this organization, or I only volunteer,
Right.
but understanding that you could be a very crucial part of that cultivated
We
relationship.
are all cultivating relationships, and that's what I meant by connect, connect, connect. You talk to people about why this organization matters to you. Enlighten them on some of the things that the organization does that they don't know about. Ask why it matters to them, and then stop talking. Listen.
Right.
Listening is a big, 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 big part of this cultivation. Um, again, my work, and I'll come out of the gate saying I know how fortunate I am. I get to focus only on high net worth individual giving. Many people do that job, and direct mail, and annual giving, and events. And so I know that it's a real gift that I have the time to do that. And when I started doing it, the person who was working with me, Chris Withers, who a lot of you know, he's a Richmond man, told me it's kind of like dating 100 people. I'm like, oh my God. but understanding what their preferences are, what's important to them, where do they go to school, do they have grandkids, and no disingenuous way at all, but listening and again, literally just building that relationship and I see a few questions about board engagement. Can I address that real quickly?
Please go for it. Yeah, that's where I was going to go next.
Sure. The board is critical because, as I said, I work with 100 people. The truth is, we work with 100 people, and our board is so important in helping us connect. Because I can pick up the phone and call someone who might be able to make $1 million gift. They're not going to know me, but they very well might know my board because that person is in their circle of friends. So I asked our board members to work with us, and they are on what I referred to earlier as our Connecting Fans and Funds Committee. We didn't have to. We chose multiple years ago, from a strategic standpoint, to what we call renovate our board. We wanted to make sure that those on our board understood that this connectivity and this development and this fundraising is part of their job. And it has really paid off, not just on the bottom financial line, but in that whole building relationships and building strength of our bench strength and leadership. And it's paid off in multiple ways. Did that answer?
So I want to draw.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I want to draw a straight line from that to something that you said, because I think that it's a fantastic connector, whether you're talking about a high net worth individual and or a board member to a new young volunteer. There's a great quote that I very poorly wrote down, so I may mangle it. But that concept of, if a mission matters to you and you matter to your friends, then it's likely that mission will also matter to your friends. Yeah. And it's interesting to me how that is actually true. That's true. I don't care what demographic you fall into, what socioeconomic, iteration you are, whether you work for a large company or a small company. I think that's a really powerful connector to show how even when you are a new volunteer, right, just you as a connector is such a powerful engine for those organizations.
Maybe especially because you're a new volunteer, right? Because you bring new energy, you bring new relationships, you bring new connectivity, right? So I think it's really important, especially with some of our younger volunteers who maybe don't have the same. And I love that quote too, by the way. I wrote it last night. So but it makes a lot of sense, right? If you have developed a passion for this mission and you like the mission and your friends like you, they're going to likely want to support what matters to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's I think that's a real. So I want to build off of that actually, and some of the other things that we're talking about, to talk a little bit about the corporate connection. Thinking about you as let's say you're someone who maybe it's a new job or even a job that you've been at for a couple of years, but you've never necessarily, I'll just say, married for the better word for it, your work life and your volunteer life. And you want to know how to make that overture. I mean, some people that are really big companies, there might be really obvious avenues, and they might really promote that they match funds, or they might really promote volunteer opportunities. But for those that, whether it's a big company or even a small company, are there any tips to how do you start that conversation with your organization? Because just like that quote, if the mission matters to you, your company and the place you've chosen to work at, it likely might matter to them that you're passionate about it.
I agree.
Are there some great tips to connect?
Yeah, I think that's it. That most employers that I know about want to support what's important to their employees when possible. And this beyond doing that, it's a wonderful way to build teams. Taking us outside of the workplace, but still working together really builds teams in different ways. So that's a selling point to anyone who would be making that decision about, are we able to volunteer at XYZ event, or can we go and help with that? I think that there's a good return on their investment to not only allow volunteers to do that, but some people, and I think it was in the comments somewhere, sometimes people make donations based on the number of hours, but again, different size organizations may not do that. But I would say highlight the return, the return that the company's going to get. We're going to be a stronger team. We're going to be a stronger team when we're doing your work, and we're able to do this work together. We're going to be a stronger team overall. And I found that it just really builds, some communication channels that haven't been there before. In fact, part of my interview, I did a quick couple of interviews with what we call our young professionals board, and they said that very thing. They're like, man, when we can bring our corporate team to volunteer at Special Olympics, they see a different side of me, but they also see a different side of themselves, and then they also see a different side of us corporate. So there's a lot of benefits that come from that, and I would just sell it on that and just talk to. I don't know who makes those decisions usually in larger corporations, but that's where I'd start.
Well, and so I love that too, because I'll tell you a trap I think that some people fall into is their volunteerism ends up being left on the resume. In other words, it's something that might have been attractive that got them hired, but then they end up not necessarily deliberately, but just not really letting it be a part of then their actual work within the organization, and then bring it up again. Right. And there's a point, Carrie makes a point in the chat about sharing that involvement in LinkedIn is huge. Now, let me tell you, when I'm doing my IOP hat on, when I'm teaching at the Institute of Philanthropy, the one thing that everybody tells me is the best thing that I ever tell my classes is to make your board, but I would say it's for any volunteer, make your board and every single volunteer suggest to them that they admit that they do that on LinkedIn. Like, just have them, when somebody joins, even as a volunteer or joins a committee, or especially if they join your board, send them a note. Maybe it's just a cut and paste thing that you just always have ready that says, here's how to add it on LinkedIn, that you're on our board, that you're on this committee. You want other people to see it, but you're putting them there because of those connections. And I think that will also break you out of that habit of your volunteerism purely being something, not that it's pure for you that way, but that the perception with your company could be, it's something they only really interacted with you on because it was a part of your resume, as opposed to it's a part of your actual life, and you're choosing. To tie it back to Deanna's presentation, you've picked this organization because you believe in it, because it aligns with you. That's very powerful then for what you can do internally.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I'll chime in on that too, because
please do, Dontres.
And I think it's extremely important, because when you look at the LinkedIn profile, your volunteerism, your nonprofit organizations that you are part of, is always at the very bottom of the list when you look at it.
Right.
So what I would suggest is you put that in as part of your current working experience, although it be volunteer, so that it shows up in that. I love the idea of an announcement of being appointed to a board, or a new board member joining the board to bring that traction. But I think there's, and we talk to our students all the time at Randolph-Macon about how important those volunteer hours are, or those nonprofit commitments are. But then it's all the way at the bottom.
Right.
So I think if we can, be more intentional about pushing that up to the top, so that folks can see exactly some of the organizations that you're involved in, is imperative.
No, I think that's a great point. I think a lot of times we get very focused on talking about what we're doing and what we're involved in within our peers, which we want. I mean, just to go right back to that great message about mission that David had said. But sometimes what that means from a channel perspective is that we end up maybe talking about our volunteerism on Facebook, But on LinkedIn, yeah, it's something that we marked, but is in the bottom. And I would encourage blend it. Let it be everywhere. And yes,
Yeah.
it does sometimes feel like you're being a little performative. You know, I mean, trust me, it's LinkedIn, right? We're all being a little performative on LinkedIn.
That's
But
okay.
at the same time, you know, that's okay. And not only that, you're doing it to get the word out about an organization that you care about. It doesn't need to be about you. It could just be about the great things that organization is. It could be about a story that you just heard. And trust me, the things that you might think are so reflexive, like that you would just do anyways, don't just leave that among your small circle of friends. Say it out loud. That's what that organization needs. I mean, that organization needs you to say that out loud.
Yeah, and I do think there's also a really careful line to walk, being in the corporate world. A lot of corporations will say, yes, we value your skill set as a technical, whatever it is, what they hired you for. And then in that recruiting process, they could say, oh, we love all of your purposeful, passionate things that you're doing for the community, and we stand for those. But then you get into an organization, and then you realize that there's a work-life balance, a business as usual, and then things that are not business as usual things. And you may get into a situation where your organization is really concerned and committed to you doing what's important to their business, and all the other things that you are really passionate about, that they said they were passionate about, is something that kind of gets pushed to the wayside. So David talked about it a lot in his presentation in regards to making sure those organizations, and Deanna did as well, making sure those organizations that you are working for are committed legitimately to some of the things that are important to you, so you don't feel like there is a balance of, well, I can't do this nonprofit because they're going to be wanting me to make sure that I get my business as usual work done.
Right.
So I think it's a really delicate line into which you have to walk, and sometimes you got to get to a point, and I'll talk about that in my presentation, to where you align your passion and purposes with who you are. And if that organization is not supporting that, then you have to make a decision.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. You'd also made a comment, Don Treese, about diversity groups within your organization, and I thought just to have you and David comment on that, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and there's a lot of organizations that have these diversity groups. I think they're more moving towards now in regards to business resource groups, because they're starting to identify how important the Hispanic community, the Black community, the LGBT community is important to their business. And then those groups will reach out to nonprofit organizations and say, hey, we have leaders within our organization that are excited about being a part of your nonprofit. So check with your organization and their business resource groups or their diversity groups, however they term them, and then become a part of them, and then look at opportunities to delve out into some nonprofit organizations. David?
Yeah. At Special Olympics, much of our work, in fact, we are really stepping up our efforts as far as inclusion of those with disabilities in the workplace. So that's a lot of the work that we're doing about inclusion. You know, our three core values are respect, inclusion, and unity. And so much of the work that we're doing is, while absolutely important of all types of diversity, much of our day-to-day work is about inclusion of those with disabilities. And I think it's, Don Treese's points are spot on as far as how people can be part of that and get involved and help move that needle in that organization forward.
So one last question here before we take our break, David. I want to pull in something that, again, I was talking with Spencer about kind of in the chat too, is about in-kind gifts.
Yeah.
I think sometimes I always feel like in-kind gifts goes one of two ways. Either one, it's the kind of thing where the organization is trying to make it really known that in-kind gifts are incredibly helpful and how they're helpful. And then I also think the other way in-kind gifts go is that people end up doing things not thinking that they're in-kind gifts. Like they don't think about them as being in-kind gifts, whether it's their time, and this is, I mean this both in terms of individual and corporation.
Right.
in terms of whether that's time, whether that's items, whatever that might be. You want to talk a little bit about in-kind gifts and sort of just how it relates to what we're talking about?
Absolutely. In-kind gifts are a huge part of our bottom line, to be honest with you. One of the things that people don't know about Special Olympics necessarily is that globally, we are the world's largest healthcare provider for those with intellectual disabilities. So at our summer games, for example, at our summer games, we have professionals in 6 disciplines, vision and auditory and podiatry, and they come in and they, because our athletes are marginalized from a healthcare perspective sometimes, this is a great opportunity for athletes to get an assessment. And when we tally up the in-kind gift of those professionals' hours that they give, because we have hundreds of them there, doctors and of all sorts, that is a tremendous contribution. That's one example of in-kind gifts that we have. Of course, some of our other corporate partners give in-kind supplies and things like that. But for this group, there are skills that you can offer, I believe, that would be, again, your time, your services in that way can be an in-kind gift. If you're a marketing expert and you help someone develop a marketing plan, or if you design part of a website, I mean, all those professional skills you're giving can be part of an in-kind gift.
Oh, that's great. All right, folks. So we've got, oh, wait, hold on one second. Actually, we do have one last question here. Just see if we can sneak this in. Speaking a little bit about the process of moving from the programmatic to administrative fund development in your organization. Looking to making Silver Moved interested in what steps to take. Sort of, yeah, going from that programmatic to the more fund development.
As a professional, like moving, as someone who works for that organization, moving from program to development. Okay. I think that's what that's asking.
Yeah, I think so.
I'll share my experience. I was with Special Olympics for 20 years, and I had pretty much every programmatic position you can imagine. I ran the games, and I did coaching, and I did lots of different things. And we had, I mentioned him earlier, Chris Withers come in and did a development audit. And he talked to our stakeholders. He talked to our board, our staff, our athletes, our families, our volunteers, our donors, and asked lots of questions to indicate how we were doing from a development and fundraising standpoint. And then he came back with multiple bullets of things that we could do. And on that list was devote one person's full-time attention to high net worth individual giving. And I raised my hand quickly because I had 20 years of impactful stories to tell. And again, development's a lot about telling stories. So for me, while I was hesitant because I really didn't have a lot of fundraising experience, I said, I would love to do this because A, I have stories, but B, again, very fortunate, our athletes are our best storytellers ever. And so they partner with me. They're on my team to help me tell stories. And so my transition from that, I would recommend, one thing that helped me tremendously is in that transition, before you make the switch, stick your toe into some development, stick your toe into another piece of the organization, talk to the people who are doing it in the organization and see what's involved. Because again, I was so fortunate that I had somebody walk alongside me for about a year, who I could call anytime and say, what do you do here? How do you do this? What about that? And it was tremendous because he was a savvy professional who'd been in the business for a long time. But it was important to me before I switched to kind of ask questions about what does it really involve? I know what it says on paper, but what's really involved? So I talked to people in the organization and asked that.
Just to really underline, because I think it also connects back to everything we're talking about, it's just that you are already, no matter where you're at in your professional life, your volunteer life, whatever, you're collecting stories. They're going to be your stories. You're going to be collecting other people's stories too, as a part of this too. But your library of that, you already probably have seen when you talk to your friends about the organization and why you care so much. You can immediately start saying, well, here's how it impacted me. Let me tell you about the one story I had the one time. And trust me, we all know how we end up becoming like little preachers for the organizations that we care about. I'll give you my favorite example because it happens all the time. My wife at one point was a communications manager at the Richmond SPCA. And we have both, since we've known each other in my life, both of our lives prior to knowing each other, been huge about rescue animals, right? So even when I'm like at the dentist, and the dentist and the dental assistant are talking about, spending a lot of money on a new puppy that's like a particular breed, whatever, and they're just talking about, like, as soon as they get done out of my mouth, I'm launching into a pitch for getting a rescue animal instead. Now, I am not an animal services guy. Like, I don't even volunteer necessarily, with these kind of organizations. But I've got our story of our dog, and I'm immediately launching into this. Like, the poor folks have to immediately listen to my soapbox about rescue animals. But even that, that's me with just a sliver, just like an arm's length away from that organization. And I've already got my story. Just think about all the stories that you've got and how that helps you. And I think that then, whether you're talking about fundraising or actually any of these aspects, I think that storytelling, you've got more than you think. And you are a sponge so early on. That's what can really, I think, build a lot of success. And I think that's a great point that you make, David, with that.
Absolutely agree. And we encourage our board to develop and tell stories at our board meetings, or our young professional board members to come in and share a story with our board, because sharing that impact across that in that forum, it moves a lot of people's impressions about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what we can do better. And it's all good stuff.
Absolutely.
Mission moments, exactly. That's what we call it.
Susan, you were going to jump in.
Can I say something? I also got started in programs and then moved into fundraising. And I feel like that was the best way for me to get into fundraising, because I knew so much of the programs. I was so deep in it. I knew everything about the program. And one of the things I did to make the transition was I joined the committee. I joined the fundraising committee. And so while I wasn't in charge of the fundraising, I was able to see how it was happening and what steps to do. And then I also volunteered outside of my organization. And so I got to practice without my boss watching me. I joined, what was it, the Relay for Life. I joined their committee. And so I got to see how that organization did their thing and kind of got to practice with some of the fundraising tips before I went back to my organization and said, now I have some skills. I would like to be more involved in the development. So that's the path I took.
Those are great points. Yeah, it's really good.
And I would say, I think echo that too, is all organizations, it doesn't matter how big or small these organizations are. I mean, I think that experience, they all need some of the same things. Sure, there's different scaffolding and sizes involved there, but I mean, you'll be amazed actually how much of it translates, no matter how big or small the organization that you're talking about. So if you can dip out, whether it's your personal volunteering into a small organization, you'll be very surprised that's some of the same workings. Making the sausage the same way. It's just the size and the scope of what some of the gears that are turning. Well, this is awesome, folks. Let's take our last 5-minute break before we'll come back with Don Treese, and then we'll have both the Q&A with Don Treese after that, and then a sort of a panel Q&A with all of our speakers today. But thank you. We got to take 5 minutes, so we'll come back, let's say 11:43. So at the 43, we'll see you then.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks, David.
Of course, thank you.
David, thanks for all those great shout outs for 4365.
Hey, you're sponsoring this. I had to laugh out loud this morning when the first thing I saw, because you guys had No BS Brass playing, and I love No BS Brass. So I took a picture. There's like probably a video of them playing and dancing. I'm like, how do they know what I'm doing today? It's a little spooky, but no, it's great. I love that park. And I worked with the visioning committee for that park, and so I love what it's doing. Kim was nice enough to invite me just to kind of be part of those conversations early on. So yeah, and then of course, SOAR 365 and Special Olympics have been partnering for a long time, and who we serve and what we do, and so it's been good. Hopefully get some text to give gifts. We'll see.
Thank you. We did actually give one.
Awesome. All right.
Which came with a match, corporate match.
I like it. All right. See you in a bit.
Thank you. I'm going to press pause on recording.